The Great Railroad Strike of 1877 was a work stoppage by railroad workers upset with their wages being cut for the second time in 8 months. Workers already were unhappy with their compensation because railway work was already paid poorly and was considered highly dangerous. It began on July 16, 1877, when workers in Martinsburg, West Virginia were told that their pay would be reduced 10%. The workers were very upset with this and began walking off the job. Dozens of trains were stopped that day, and by the next day, railroads were shut down completely. The governor of West Virginia decided federal assistance was needed to stop the strike, and American troops were sent in to intervene. The soldiers managed to drive some of the trains, but this was just the beginning of the strike. Other workers in Baltimore and Ohio had begun walking off the job, refusing to work until the new rule was changed. On July 17, 1877, the strike was the lead story in New York City newspapers. The headline painted the workers in a bad light. Foolish firemen and brakemen on the Baltimore and Ohio road cause of the trouble. The newspaper stated that the lower wages were necessary because the country was still in an economic depression, stemming from the Panic of 1873. This headline did nothing to stop the strikes, it actually made them more prominent. Another line in Pittsburgh stopped working, and again federal troops were sent in to deal with the situation. 600 troops faced off with the workers, and it escalated to the point of them firing off into the crowd, killing 26 people and wounding others. When local citizens heard about the shooting, they were outraged. Several Pennsylvania railroad buildings were burned. This was the first time during the strike that lives were lost. Over the course of the strike, around 10,000 workers had walked off the job from all over the country. Around 100 strikers were killed, many more wounded, and 1,000 people had gone to jail. The strike only lasted for about 2 weeks before they all returned to work, mainly because federal troops had shown no signs of stopping intervening and using violence to stop all the protests. They also failed because of the lack of organization and game plan of the workers. They were more of spontaneous efforts than planned events. Even though it was considered a loss at the time for the workers because they didn't accomplish anything, the market left on American labor issues resonated for years to come. It showed labor organizers that people will not sit idly by if they continue to cut wages and working regulations. They would eventually fight back if they were unhappy enough. It was the first real stand taken by workers against big corporations, in this case, the railroad companies. This event played a huge part in workers being unhappy with labor unions about compensation, and it set the stage for many more events to come in the future. However, it also tells how bad things were during the Long Depression at this time, as railroad companies didn't have any other choice than to cut benefits because of economic succession. While the workers had a right to be upset to see their already low wages cut by 10%, the companies really didn't have any other option. 3 takeaways I had was how it was fascinating to read about such a large number of workers from all over the country coming together and taking a stand for something. It started with a small group in West Virginia, but eventually escalated to people all over the country. The fact that hundreds of federal troops were deployed at the strike showed how important the railroad business really was. Without it, nothing could get transported, and there would be a big halt in trade and retail all over the country. Finally, the amount of deaths caught my attention. While 100 may not seem like a ton compared to other major events in history, it is a sizable number for a strike. That impacted me the most, but as I was reading, I was very intrigued to find out the end result from the strike, and was somewhat surprised that the workers walked away with nothing. They ultimately could not combat military force and weren't prepared enough with their strikes.